So you want to be happy. Most people do. Most people strive for that constant state of contentment, but very few people actually achieve it. So is there some sort of secret? Is there a certain way to achieve long-lasting happiness? I'm Noah Sokolsky, and you're watching Pinpoint here on Deet-Doe Productions. So the first step in figuring this all out is defining what exactly makes someone happy. I've been trying to figure out the answer to this question for months, and recently I was given some bad news that completely threw off the mood of my day. I was unfocused, my mind was cloudy, and I couldn't seem to think about anything other than the thing that was making me upset. And I know we've all been there. So that day I was on the schedule for my work, and I remember going into work and still feeling just as cruddy as I was throughout the school day. I wasn't doing my job to the best of my abilities, and my boss noticed this. He took me outside and gave me a lecture about separating professional life from personal life, and he threatened to fire me. This made me feel more cruddy. I went back to my job feeling worse than I did when I came in. But I decided to focus and put my game face on. I worked the rest of the 5 hours, and by the time 10 p.m. rolled around, I actually wasn't sad anymore. In fact, I was happy. I was feeling great. So what exactly happened between those 5 hours that made me go from extremely sad to extremely happy? So I like to think that all situations are only 90% as bad as you react to it and 10% about what actually happened. So, for example, let's just say you were kicked off the baseball team. You could react horribly and say that it's the end of your baseball career and just give up, or you could take it as a learning experience. And you could decide to work hard and build your skills up for the next baseball season so you can actually become a better player overall. For me at work, I later realized that the situation wasn't nearly as bad as I was making it out to be in my head, simply because I was reacting so poorly to it. Now, believe it or not, I didn't actually make up this concept. It actually has a scientific term. Don't just take it from me. Take it from Dan Gilbert, a Harvard psychologist who studies the science of being happy. So Dan Gilbert had a TED Talk called The Science of Happiness. And in his TED Talk, he talked about how our brain evolved, and he specifically talked about the part of our brain called the prefrontal cortex. And it has the ability to simulate situations before they actually happen.
Now, what does a prefrontal cortex do for you that should justify the entire architectural overhaul of the human skull in the blink of evolutionary time? Well, turns out the prefrontal cortex does lots of things, but one of the most important things it does is it is an experience simulator. Pilots practice in flight simulators so that they don't make real mistakes in planes. Human beings have this marvelous adaptation that they can actually have experiences in their heads before they try them out in real life. Ben & Jerry's doesn't have liver and onion ice cream, and it's not because they whipped some up, tried it, and went yuck. It's because without leaving your armchair, you can simulate that flavor and say yuck before you make it.
Okay, so what does this have to do with happiness? Well, Gilbert then proposes a thought experiment to try to test the prefrontal cortex's ability to simulate happiness towards a certain situation.
Let's see how your experience simulators are working. Let's just run a quick diagnostic before I proceed with the rest of the talk. Here's 2 different futures that I invite you to contemplate, and you can try to simulate them and tell me which one you think you might prefer. One of them is winning the lottery. This is about $314 million, and the other is becoming paraplegic.
Well, that's a no-brainer. Obviously, anyone would be happier being a lottery winner than being a paraplegic. That just doesn't even make sense. Well, Gilbert collected data on these 2 situations, and here's what he found.
And interestingly, there are data on these 2 groups of people, data on how happy they are. And this is exactly what you expected, isn't it? But these aren't the data. I made these up. These are the data. You failed the pop quiz and you're hardly 5 minutes into the lecture.
After just 1 year, the happiness of a lottery winner and a paraplegic were exactly the same. Gilbert later explains in his TED Talk that with a few exceptions, it only takes 3 months after a traumatic experience for it to have no impact on your everyday happiness. So Gilbert explains this phenomenon with the term impact bias, which basically means that people tend to overestimate the amount of impact that every situation is going to have because their prefrontal cortex tells them to. It's sort of like this malfunction that we have where we believe that everything is going to be either way worse or way better than it actually is. For some reason, our prefrontal cortexes lack the ability to accurately predict how we'll feel towards certain situations. So what does this mean? Well, Gilbert talks about this more in his TED Talk. He actually tells us that we can synthesize or create our own happiness.
Human beings have something that we might think of as a psychological immune system, a system of cognitive processes, largely non-conscious cognitive processes, that help them change their views of the world so that they can feel better about the worlds in which they find themselves. We synthesize happiness, but we think happiness is a thing to be found. Now, you don't need me to give you too many examples of people synthesizing happiness, I suspect, though I'm going to show you some experimental evidence. You don't have to look very far for evidence. As a challenge to myself, since I say this once in a while in lectures, I took a copy of the New York Times and tried to find some instances of people synthesizing happiness. The first one is Jim Wright. Some of you are old enough to remember he was the chairman of the House of Representatives. And he resigned in disgrace when this young Republican named Newt Gingrich found out about a shady book deal he had done. He lost everything. Most powerful Democrat in the country, lost everything. What does he have to say all these years later about it? I am so much better off, physically, financially, mentally, and in almost every other way. What other way would there be to be better off? Maurice Bickham is somebody you've never heard of. Maurice Bickham uttered these words. Upon being released, he was 78 years old. He'd spent 37 years in Louisiana State Penitentiary for a crime he didn't commit. He was ultimately exonerated at the age of 78 through DNA evidence. And what did he have to say about his experience? I don't have 1 minute's regret. It was a glorious experience. Glorious! Some of you recognize this young photo of Pete Best, who was the original drummer for the Beatles, until they, kind of like sent him out on an errand and snuck away and picked up Ringo on a tour. Well, in 1994, when Pete Best was interviewed, yes, he's still a drummer, yes, he's a studio musician, he had this to say, I'm happier than I would have been with the Beatles. Okay.
So anyone might be skeptical to this at first. I mean, clearly these people aren't actually happy, right? Well, Gilbert and his team actually did studies on this, and they found that the brain actually creates new neural pathways when they're creating synthetic happiness, which basically means that the brain is reshaping itself to actually make the situation that the person is in more enjoyable. Okay, so this is all well and good, but this information is useless if we don't know how to do it willingly. So I did some research, and I went to the channel Charisma on Command, where the owner, Charlie Halpert, talks about the 5 aspects about staying happy. Now, I won't go into all of them. The link to that video will be in the description below. But the 5th rung, the top rung to the ladder of happiness, according to Charlie, is how you create your mindset.
I've spent literally years studying happiness, the people who have it, the people who don't, and then applying those lessons to my own life to see which actually work from experience. And what I can tell you from my own experience is that there is this thing called a happiness ladder, and there's 5 rungs to it. All the first 4 are focused outwardly. They're where you orient yourself, where do you place your action. The 5th one is about mindset. And the mindset shift is to appreciation. Because the truth is, oftentimes, everything what we're trying to get, we're focused on what we don't have. And if you can shift your mindset simply from not focusing on what I lack, but what I have, that is the shift that will lead to the most lasting happiness.
So Charlie finds his happiness in the things that he already has. Now this is essential in creating your own happiness in your brain. The truth is, you're never gonna find happiness. That's just a made-up concept. You have to really take a look inward and try to discover what makes you happy already. I watched another TED Talk in this very topic, featuring author and monk David Steindl-Rast. And here's what he had to say about it.
How can each one of us find a method for living gratefully, not just once in a while being grateful, but moment by moment to be grateful? How can we do it? It's a very simple method. It's so simple that it's actually what we were told as children when we learned to cross the street. Stop, look, go. But how often do we stop? We rush through life, we don't stop. We miss the opportunity because we don't stop. We have to stop, we have to get quiet, and we have to build stop signs into our lives.
Ross goes on and explains how he builds stop signs in his life by putting stickers on things like the faucet and the light switch, because after his trip to Africa, he would realize how great these things actually are. He talks about how he would turn on the faucet and feel elated. Then the next step is looking.
Then the next thing is to look. You look, you open your eyes, you open your ears, you open your nose, you open all your senses for this wonderful richness that is given to us. If there's no end to it, that is what life is all about.
Ross then tells us about how after we stop, we must actually look around and take in what is around us, the greatness that we have already. And this is how the go fits in our analogy.
When we open our hearts to the opportunities invite us to do something. And that is the third. Stop, look, and then go and really do something. And what we can do is whatever life offers to you in that present moment. Mostly it's the opportunity, enjoy. Sometimes it's something more difficult, but whatever it is, if we take this opportunity, go with it. We are creative. Those are the creative people. And that little stop, look, go is such a potent seed that it can revolutionize our world.
Once you've taken a moment to stop and look, your brain will automatically make you happy. You'll be able to see what you already have that makes you happy, and you'll instantly be elated. I encourage you to try this yourself. This worked for me when I was at work. I was in such a fast pace, going throughout my day and trying so hard to get rid of the thing that was making me upset. But once I got into work and really focused on what I had, I was able to stop from my fast-paced life and really take a look around at what made me really happy. And once I left that shift that day, I felt great. This works almost 100% of the time. So can it really be that simple? I think it is. You really just need to stop, look around, and feel good about the things you already have, and your brain will do the rest. It will be able to synthetically create happiness based off the things that you already have. So in reality, you've been happy this whole time. You just need to tap into it. Thanks for watching Pinpoint. My name is Noah Sokolsky, and I'll see you next time here on Deet-Doe Productions.